Shards of Domination, take 3.
Yeah, this time for sure. This time for sure we'll be able to record this video and not have it become invalid before we upload it.
There's no possible way that they could change it a fourth time in 1 week, right?
All right, so what's the deal? What is the current understanding of what's going to be happening to Shards of Domination?
All right, so we got Bloodlink. The damage and healing amount has been increased at all ranks by 20%. That's massive because Bloodlink was already really good. Winds of Winter. The amount of damage and healing stored by the winds has been increased at all ranks by 45%, which, man, whenever you see something get buffed by 45%, that immediately makes you question how good this is now. And the developer's note stating, the difference between the 3 rune words for Shards of Domination system is bigger than we want it to be. We have identified a bug in the Winds of Winter, which was preventing some damaging and healing abilities from counting towards its total. And we have retuned Winds of Winter and Bloodlink so that the relative power between the rune word bonuses is more balanced. That word is hard to say.
Yeah, a little bit of a tongue twister there.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me in particular because the fact that it's a bug interaction being fixed maybe means that this is going to be a varying value based on which spec you're playing. And if you were a spec that, had this thing underperforming because of a bug, maybe it's actually even more likely to be something good now for you.
I felt like maybe it was just like abnormally bad for ranged DPS, but the ranged DPS that I know that used it, anecdotally, it did very little damage, like 16,000 damage across a fight and stuff.
Yeah, so for context, this follows a set of changes that have happened for Shards of Domination over this week.
Yes.
Right on reset day, they pushed a hotfix a couple hours into the reset that nerfed Unholy by 50%, nerfed Blood by 40%, nerfed Frost also by like 20%. Then they reverted that about 90 minutes later. 90 hours would have been a lot longer, but 90 minutes only. And that was a pretty quick revert. And then they were like, all right, we're actually not going to touch this in a nerfing way, right? We're not gonna bring these shards down. But then they've just announced this, so they are going to be bringing Blood up a little bit. Although 20%, hard to call 20% a little bit, right? 20% is actually quite a bit, and Frost up by a huge amount. So I mean, it's been a huge, like the amount of damage that Blood will deal next week versus how much it did after the nerf this week for those 90 minutes. It's like twice as much damage. It's crazy.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, basically most of the tanks were using the blood set bonus in an ideal situation. Most of the DPS, for more or less, were using Chaos Bane, the Unholy set bonus. But now this really makes you question what you're going to be playing for sure, especially with that massive Winds of Winter one. So kind of run us through who is looking to play this Winds of Winter now.
Yeah, so Winds of Winter, all 3 are being brought into a spot where it is actually conceivable you'd want to use each one of them. Something that may help make your decision as well is the specific shards that make up the set. Some of them gain or lose value in certain situations. For instance, the Blood Shard, the Blood Damage Shard, increases your damage when you have 50% more health than your target, which on a fight like Sylvanas Windrunner, who dies at 50 or 45%, depending on difficulty, you might not want to put that one on, right? Not going to have any effect on Sylvanas damage. On a fight like Guardian of the First Ones, the Frost Damage Shard increases your damage when you hit a new target, which is only for the first 20 seconds of that fight. So some gems, maybe you want to choose a set bonus based on what you're kind of aiming for in the near or medium term. And so that might color your decision a little bit, because I do think that in general, they're going to be fairly close. Another thing to think about is, is the set bonus working in AoE, or is this just doing pure single target damage? And then another thing to think about is just, how is this working for my spec, right? Frost in particular, the way that it functions, is looking for you to be a crit-based spec that does many smaller, medium-sized hits. Because if you're doing large hits, you're going to run into that cap of like, it can only store a certain percentage of damage from your attack, right? So like Moonkin, for example, how do those factors all come together for you?
Yeah, so Moonkin actually gets a decent amount of crit like in our cooldowns, and like Winds of Winter we could store up a lot. But we do all of our hits in like very big amounts, so it's not super great for balance. I suspect that Chaos Bane will still be better for that. But like you said, can you imagine intermissions like Ainsmith intermission, where you get your Chaos Bane proccing at just a bad time, and then it's like the alternative could be something that is conceivably a bit better just for that encounter specifically. So I do suspect that at least most of these will be usable in some aspect on a per fight basis.
Yeah. Now, when you're thinking about like what decision you should make with regards to upgrading shards, of course, many players have already committed hundreds of Stygian Embers to a certain
Yes.
game plan, and there's a good chance that your best short-term expenditures over the next couple weeks are to just keep investing in that Unholy set.
Go to
Even if in
5.
theory, like Blood rank 5 is better than Unholy rank 5, Unholy rank 5 you can earn in 1 or 2 weeks, whereas Blood rank 5 is going to take you 3 or 4, and so just go with the short-term gain depending on what your goals are looking like. By contrast, if you're, say, a Mythic Plus player, PvP player, you don't need to have your plan changed at all by the set bonus thing because you're not doing content where set bonuses work. So you can continue with that usual game plan of the 3 damage shards and then your 2 favorite of the others, usually that Absorb Shield one, a really good option for anybody who's looking for a nice off shard.
Exactly. And on top of that too, it's one of those things that, like you said, I don't think you're ever going to stop your immediate progression into like that Chaos Bane. I think you are just going to slam it all the way up to rank 5 and then slowly pepper in the smaller ranks.
For the players that had been on that game plan already, if you were somebody who hadn't made a commitment yet, if you're somebody who upgraded a couple different shards, if you're somebody who hasn't gotten a helmet yet, so you didn't have your Unholy set yet, I think now it's a great idea of like, hey, I mean, if you have the option and you have a shoulders and no chest piece or helmet, go with the Frost set bonus. That's the one the shoulders let you wear. That sort of, what you have right now as a tiebreaker is, I think, a great way to build in a way that when we recorded this video last time, I advised the opposite because I thought Unholy was that much better, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think now, go with what you've got right now.
Yeah. It's funny how things change in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
But I do think that making sure that you're staying tuned with your class guide writer, check the Wowhead guides and see when they were updated most recently. I'm sure that your specialization specifically will be updated probably pretty rapidly. I suspect that I'm going to be getting a ping about this change in a moment's time, advising me to update it as quickly as possible. And I suspect that there will probably be something revisited, revised by the weekly reset.
Yeah, I think that most of the Wowhead guides should have updates on which shards are best in the very near future. So definitely go and check those out. A great source for figuring these sorts of things out. Of course, your specific decision has all of those other factors that you need to consider as well, but getting that info about what's good for your spec is always really, really, really useful. So there is an extremely good resource available on Wowhead, of course.
Exactly. So yeah, make sure to check that out. We will also be linking down these articles that we used here, talking about the great nerf and revert.
The old nerf, revert, buff, roller coaster ride.
Repeat.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, that's going to be it for us this week. Shards of Domination. Very cool system. Goodbye.